Değerli konuklar, sevgili izleyicilerimiz, Gelecek Hemen Şimdi temasıyla düzenlediğimiz etkinliğimize hepiniz hoş geldiniz efendim. Gelecek hemen şimdi diyoruz bugün çünkü aslına bakarsanız geleceği anlamak, geleceği tahminlemek, geleceğe hazırlanmak, gelecekteki rekabeti, gelecekteki iş modellerini, gelecekteki yönetişim yapısını bugünden hayal etmek ve kurgulamak çok ama çok kritik hale geliyor. Hep böyle değil miydi? Evet, hep böyleydi aslına bakarsanız. 1997'de Harvard Business Review'da yayınladığımız bir makalede aslında tek bir gelecek olmadığını, bir gelecek setiyle karşı karşıya olduğumuzu ve aslında tek bir geleceğe odaklanarak oraya gitmek yerine değişik gelecek alternatiflerinin ağırlıklarıyla birlikte bu set içerisinde nasıl yer aldığını ve bu farklı gelecek senaryolarına bugünden nasıl hazırlanabileceğimizi anlattığımız çok keyifli bir çalışma paylaşmıştık. Söylediğim gibi yanılmıyorsam yıl 1997 idi. O günden bugüne baktığımızda neredeyse 30 yıllık bir süre geçmiş ama hala daha belirsizlik konusu gitgide şiddetini arttırarak hayatımızın merkezinde yer alıyor. Hala daha geleceği anlamaya yönelik iteratif çalışmalar, bakış açıları ön plana çıkıyor ve en önemlisi de bu konuda bize yardımcı olacak çerçevelerin anlamı ve önemi gitgide artıyor. İşte bugün hem böyle bir çerçeveye, bir modele bakacağız hem de aslında alanlarında uluslararası noktada, dünya çapında uzman isimlerle birlikte yönetişim perspektifinde geleceğe dair bizi nasıl bir resmin beklediğini de hep birlikte konuşacağız, tartışacağız. Detaylara geçmeden önce ben birkaç konuyu sizlere hatırlatmayı arzu ediyorum. Artık alıştınız ama ben yine de bir kez daha üstünden geçeyim. Eğer bize soru sormak istiyorsanız sevgili dostlarımız, sorular sekmesinden sorunlarınızı iletebilirsiniz. Ben takip ediyor olacağım tabletimden. Mümkün olduğunca sizin sorularınızı da değerli konuklarımıza aktarıp sizin adınıza cevaplarını almaya çalışacağım. Kaynaklar artık bizim alameti farikamız oldu baktığınızda. Yine orada çok güzel kaynaklar var. Hem Harvard Business Review olarak bizim hem de bugün etkinliği birlikte düzenlediğimiz sevgili dostumuz ARGE Consulting'in de kaynakları var. Sizin için güzel bir kütüphane oluşturduk orada. Keyifle okuyacağınızı düşünüyorum. Ve tabii ki her zaman olduğu gibi yine İngilizce, Türkçe tercüme seçeneklerimiz var. Hangi dilde izlemek isterseniz onun ilgili butonunu tıklayarak oradan Türkçe'ye veya İngilizce'ye geçebilirsiniz. For our English speaking friends, we have simultaneous interpretation.
Efendim, zaten hali hazırda kullanmışsınızdır. Türkçe, İngilizce, eş zamanlı çevirimiz her zamanki gibi var. İstediğiniz kanalı tıklayarak doğrudan İngilizce ya da Türkçe olarak dinleyebilirsiniz. Çok teşekkür.
Söylediğim gibi aslında geleceğe dair bakış açımızın gitgide farklılaştığı, artık açık denizlerde sonsuz görünüşün olduğu, ufukların olmadığı bir dünyadan geçtiğimizi kabul ediyoruz. Artık sis içerisinde gemiyi götürebilmek, artık değişken rotaları düşünebilip bu rotalara göre geminin gidişatını doğru zamanda değiştirebilmek, yeni bir döneme, yeni bir çağa geçerken eskiyle yeni arasındaki o akıllı pivotu yapabilmek çok kritik hale geliyor. Bu kritik hale gelme noktasında da aslına bakarsanız herkes bir arayış içerisinde. Bugüne kadar bizi buraya getiren formüllerin artık ne kadar daha ileriye götüreceğinden emin değiliz. Bugüne kadar bizi başarılı kılan yaklaşımların bundan sonra da bizi başarılı kılacağından yine emin değiliz. Dolayısıyla yeni bakış açılarına, yeni yaklaşımlara ihtiyaç duyuyoruz. Bununla birlikte her şeyin sorgulandığı bir dönemden geçiyoruz desek herhalde yanlış olmaz. Kapitalizmin geleceğinden küreselleşmenin nereye gideceğine kadar, dünyada alışageldiğimiz iş modellerinin devamlılığından yeni nesil çalışanlarla birlikte nasıl bir organizasyon modeli kurulması gerektiğine kadar her noktada çok yapısal, genel kabulleri sorgulayan değişik bakış açılarının devreye girdiğini veya böyle sorgulamaların veya meydan okumaların ön planda olduğunu görüyoruz. Böyle bir dünyada başarıyı sürdürülebilir, sürekli kılabilmek ve geleceğe dair aslında aynı anda iki boyutta yaşayabilmek çok önemli hale geliyor. Yani bugünün ihtiyaçlarına, bugünkü kaslarımızla onları da güçlendirerek, geliştirerek yanıt verirken bir taraftan da geleceği hayal etmek ve o geleceğe giden yolun kilometre taşlarını bugünden döşeyebilmek gerekiyor. Yani aslında günümüzün liderlerinin, karar vericilerinin, iş dünyasındaki herkesin hem bugünde hem gelecekte yaşaması ve future back dediğimiz o gelecekten bugüne gelerek, aslında gelecekten gelip mi demeliyiz buna bilmiyorum ama gelecekten bugüne doğru gelip sonra oraya doğru doğru gidecek yolu kurgulamanın ana eksen haline geldiği bir dünyanın içinden geçtiğimizi görüyoruz biz Harvard Business Review olarak. Şimdi gelin bu yeni perspektifi biraz daha yakından anlayalım. Bu konuya gerçekten uzun zamandır çok emek veren, hem düşünsel olarak hem uygulama anlamında uluslararası çok ciddi deneyime sahip olan çok değerli bir isim bizlerle birlikte. ARGE Danışmanlığın kurucusu ve başkanı sevgili Doktor Yılmaz Argü'den ben ona hocam diyorum. Yılmaz hocam hoş geldin.
Hoş bulduk Serdar Bey.
Yılmaz hocam, ben bizim bakış açımızdan biraz genel çerçeveyi çizdim ama ekranı size bırakıyorum. Yeni bir perspektif, yeni bir bakış açısına ihtiyacımız var. Geleceği daha iyi anlamak ve bunun avantajını yaşayabilmek için onu da sizden dinleyelim. Buyurun söz sizde hocam.
Çok teşekkürler. Bütün izleyicilerimizi sevgi ve saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bundan 30 yıl önce tam bugün yaşam kalitesi yönetim kalitesiyle artar diye bir hayalle ilk adım attığımız yolculuğumuzda bu 30 yılda dünyada en iyi tanınan Türk yönetim danışmanlığı şirketi olmanın onurunu yaşıyoruz. Belki de en önemli şansımız çalıştığımız kurumların kendi sektörlerinde bulundukları alanlarda lider kurumlar olması ve çalıştığım arkadaşların da son derece nitelikli insanlar olması. Bunu sağlayan en önemli unsur ise aslında karşılıklı güven. Çünkü kurumlar, bu kurumların liderleri sorunlarını, problemlerini, konularını ancak güvendikleri kurumla paylaşarak çözmeye gayret ediyorlar. Güvenin çeşitli boyutları var. Birincisi elbette ki yetkinlik boyutu. Yani hakikaten o soruna çözüm üretebileceklerine güvenmeleri lazım. İkincisi ise ahlaki boyutu. Birlikte çalıştıkları kurumların hakikaten o sorunlara sahip çıkacağını, bu konudaki gizliliğe dikkat edeceğine emin olmak istiyorlar. Bu güveni sağlayabilmiş olmak bizim için de çok büyük onur ve bu açıdan bütün hem çalışanlarımıza hem de birlikte çalışma fırsatı bulduğumuz liderlere özellikle teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Çünkü her çözülen problem, her yaratılan yeni bir sistem sadece bizim yardımcı olduğumuz ve destek olduğumuz, öğrettiğimiz bir konu olmuyor. Aynı zamanda biz de öğreniyoruz. Karşılıklı öğrenme problemlerin zorluğu arttıkça daha da hızlı olmaya başlıyor. Onun için bizim açımızdan da son derece önemli bir fırsat. Kurulduğumuz günden bu yana, yani 30 senedir 2 tane politikamız da bu açıdan çok bize fayda sağladı diye düşünüyorum. Bunlardan birincisi ilk günden itibaren senede 1 ayımızı entelektüel sermayenin gelişimine adayacağız dedik. Yani hem öğrenmeye hem de yayınlarımızla, konuşmalarımızla toplumsal gelişimi desteklemeye. Bunun bizim güncel kalmamıza, yeni yönetim anlayışlarını yakından takip edebilmemize, bunun da ötesinde içselleştirebilmemize çok büyük yardımcı olduğunu ve böylelikle de hep bir adım önde ilerleyerek müşterilerimizle birlikte çalıştığımız kurumlara da değer yaratmaya destek olduğunu düşünüyorum. İkinci politikamız ise yine o zamanlar için belki çok yenilikçi bir politika olan sosyal sermayeyi geliştirmek ve topluma fayda sağlamak üzere haftada 1 günümüzü gönüllü işlere ayırma politikamızdı. Bu sadece bir zaman ayırma kavramı olarak değil, toplumsal gelişimi nasıl destekliyoruz diyerek de kendimizi sürekli test ettik. Ve bu bir günde, yani gönüllü olarak yaptığımız çalışmalarda hangi sonuçlara ulaştığımızı ve bunun yıllık performans değerlendirmemizde bile göz önüne alınmasını sağlamakta bize çok önemli katkılarda bulundu. Hem toplumda tanınmamızı hem de birçok alanda fayda sağlamamızın önünü açtığını söyleyebilirim. Birçok sivil toplum kuruluşunun kuruluşunda, yönetiminde, süreçlerinin gelişiminde ve aynı zamanda onların ön plana çıkartmak istedikleri kavramın toplumda çok daha iyi bir yer bulabilmesi için ödül mekanizmalarının geliştirilmesinde konusunda çok çalışmalar yapma fırsatı sundu bize. Bizim hayata bakışımızda birkaç tane konu çok kritik. Herhangi bir işe ele aldığımızda ilk önce strateji, yani seçim yapmak, hangi yöne gideceğimiz konusunu netleştirmeye gayret ederiz. Çünkü her şey gideceğimiz yönle alakalıdır. Bunun yanı sıra bunu doğru işi yapmak diyoruz. Doğru işi tespit etsek de işi doğru yapmadığımız zaman, yani kalite anlayışını bu işe yansıtmadığımız, süreçlerimizi iyileştirmediğimiz zaman gene sonuç almak mümkün değil. Bu ikisini gerçekleştirirken aynı zamanda sürdürülebilirliği sağlama ihtiyacımız var. Bu da kurumsallaşma, kurumların geleceğe hazırlanması, Serdar Bey'in de bahsettiği gibi sadece bugünü değil, aynı zamanda geleceği yönetmeye çaba göstermemizde gerçekleşiyor. Zaman içerisinde şunu da çok net bir şekilde gözlemledik ki, iyi yönetimin olması ancak doğru bir iklim ve kültürde olabiliyor. İşte bu iklim ve kültürü gerçekleştiren de iyi yönetişim. Yani yönetimin yönlendirilmesi ve gözetilmesi. Bu sistematiği doğru kurguladığımız yerlerde hakikaten başarının da sürekliliği, sürdürülebilirliği olduğunu gözlemleyebiliyoruz. Küresel gelişmeler bizi çok farklı boyuttaki krizlerle karşı karşıya kalmamıza neden oldu bu 30 sene içerisinde. En sonuncusu Covid-19. Biliyorsunuz hepimizin hayatını belki de kökten değiştirdi. Bazı endüstrileri çok geliştirirken bazı endüstrilerin ortadan kalkmasına bile neden oluyor. Veya çok farklı boyutlara gelmesine neden oluyor. Bu gelişmelerin takip edilmesi, bunlarla ilgili uyarlamaların gerçekleştirilmesi, hatta bunlara yönelik olarak geliştirilen yönetim anlayışlarının gelişimine katkı bulunmayı da ARGE olarak özen gösterdiğimiz konular oldu. Ve bu da bizim yönetime yönelik çeşitli konularda gerek kalite konusunda, gerek entegre düşünce konusunda, gerek sürdürülebilirlik konusunda ve birçok farklı yönetim aracını hem geliştirmemize hem uygulamamıza hem de dünyada tanınmamıza yardımcı olduğunu söyleyebilirim. Şimdi önümüzdeki dönemde şunu gözlemliyoruz ki kapitalizm artık öyle bir açmaza doğru ilerliyor ve birçok krizin de temelinde bazı aşırılıklar yatıyor. İşte bunlara çözüm getirebilecek sorumlu liderlik anlayışının da ben Anadolu topraklarında tarihinde saklı olduğunu düşünüyorum. Sadece burada değil ama burada da çok önemli ipuçları olduğu kanısındayım. Bundan yaklaşık 750 sene önce Ahi Evran'ın, Hacı Bektaş Veli'nin, Yunus Emre'nin birçok fikirleri, yaklaşımları belki de Rönesans'tan önce aydınlanmanın temelini oluşturan unsurlardı. Birkaç konuya değinelim, örnek vermek üzere. Örneğin ahilik kültürü aslında dürüstlüğün, dayanışmanın sanatla, ustalıkla, işe saygıyla birleşmesinden oluşan bir kültür. Birçoğunuz duymuşsunuzdur pabucunu dama atmak diye. Ahilik kültüründe pabucunu dama atmak şu demek oluyor. Herhangi bir çalışan, sanatkar işini kaliteli yapmadığı zaman o sektörde çalışanlar belli bir süre için o kişiyi o faaliyeti yürütmekten men ediyorlar ve bu dönem içinde de pabucunu dama asıyorlar. Yani onunla iş yapmayın bir dönem diye. Dolayısıyla burada bize neyi gösteriyor? Bir sektördeki herhangi bir problem aslında bütün sektörü etkileyebiliyor. Dolayısıyla oradaki kaliteye sahip çıkmak da hepimizin görevi. Kolektif bir görev. Sadece kendimize değil, endüstrimize de sahip çıkmayı bize vurgulayan bir unsur. Yunus Emre'nin şöyle bir lafı var. Diyor ki, derdi dünya olanın dünya kadar derdi olur. Bu sadece ahiretle ilgilenin demek değil. Aslında sadece dünyalıkla ve kısa vadeyle ilgilenmek yerine insanlıkla ve gelişmeyle uzun vadeli bir bakış açısını benimsemeyle problemleri çözebiliriz demek. Birazdan panelde buna ilişkin bazı örnekler de vereceğiz. Kitabımızda da yeni çıkarttığımız kitabımızda da kullanmak üzere. Ancak bu kavramların ne kadar önemli olduğunu vurgulamak adına bu sözü özellikle belirtmek istedim. Yine Hacı Bektaş Veli diyor ki, ilim kullanmadığınız yolun sonu karanlıktır. Dolayısıyla teknolojiye, ilime, bilime sürekli yakın takip etme ihtiyacımız var. Bu nedenle hayal gücünün yaratıcılık ve atılımın temeli olduğuna, yaşam kalitesini geliştirmek için bilim ve teknolojiden faydalanmaya, geleceğimizin güvencesi olarak sürekli öğrenme ve eğitime ve işimizin, geleceğimizin garantisi olarak hem çalışanlarımızın gelişimine ve onların kalitesine hem de itibarımıza, yani güvenirliğe özen gösterme ihtiyacımızı bu sözler ne kadar da öz bir şekilde ortaya koyuyorlar. İşte gelecek için biz de 30. yılımız adına Sustainable Success Model, sürdürülebilir başarı modeli diye bir kitap yayınladık. İngilizcesi hazır, elimde de bulunuyor. Türkçesi de çok yakında çıkıyor olacak. Bu kitaptan edinmek isteyen izleyicilerimiz şu anda ekranda gördüğünüz QR koddan hemen fotoğrafını çekerek bir forma ulaşabilirsiniz. Ve bu formda adresinizi Türkçe veya İngilizce olarak istediğinizi belirtirseniz hazır olur olmaz bu kitapları size de aktarmaktan, iletmekten büyük bir memnuniyet duyacağız. Özetle 30 yıldır yönetim kalitesini geliştirmek için bizimle birlikte çalışma fırsatı veren müşterilerimize, beraber çalıştığım bütün arkadaşlarıma, gerek ahlaken gerek nitelikleriyle adımıza duyulan güveni arttıran arkadaşlarımıza ve bugünkü organizasyonu birlikte gerçekleştirmekten keyif aldığımız Harvard Business Review'ya teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Şimdi gene önümüzdeki dönemde çok önem taşıyacağını düşündüğüm birkaç konuyu gündeme getirecek panele geçeceğiz. Burada ilk önce Avrupa Kalite Vakfı'nın genel CEO'su 2020 yılında yenilenen iş mükemmelliği modeliyle ilgili bizimle gelişmeleri paylaşacak. Biliyorsunuz bu iş mükemmelliği modeli ulusal kalite hareketinin de temelini oluşturan bir unsurdu. Ve burada yapılan çalışmalar mesela Türkiye'nin bugün en büyük ihracat sektörü olan otomotiv sektörünün de bu başarıya ulaşmasının temelinde bulunan önemli harçlardan bir tanesidir. İkinci bir konu olarak güvenin kazanılması aynı zamanda şeffaflıkla, hesap verebilirlikle olunuyor. Bunu sağlamak üzere Uluslararası Entegre Raporlama Konseyi ile sürdürülebilirlik standartlarının birleşmesinden ortaya çıkan Değer Raporlama Vakfı'nın kuruluşu geçen hafta gerçekleşti. Bu vakfın direktörlerinden Sayın Doktor Jeremy Osborne da bizimle beraber olacak. O da bu gelişmeleri bizlerle paylaşacak. Ben de Serdar Bey'in sorularına cevap verirken 30. yılımız için geliştirmiş olduğumuz bu sürdürülebilir başarı modeline ilişkin öngörüleri, bu modelin nasıl çalıştığına yönelik bilgileri sizle paylaşmaya çalışacağım. Şimdi dolayısıyla sözü Serdar Bey'e bırakıyor. Hepinize bizi izlediğiniz için teşekkür ediyorum.
Hocam çok teşekkür ederim. Vallahi işimi çok kolaylaştırdınız. Çok güzel bir perspektif verdiniz. Bu arada ben açılışta öyle bir hızlı girince atlamışım. 30. yılı ARGE Danışmanlığın gerçekten kutlu olsun. Tebrik ediyoruz sizi. Gerçekten 30 yıldır yönetişim başta olmak üzere strateji noktasında birçok konuya çok detaylı biçimde el atıyorsunuz. Bir sürü kalıcı eser bıraktınız. Burada da hem sizi, sizin nezdinizde de bütün ekibi tebrik etmeyi arzu ediyorum. Sizin de söylediğiniz gibi şimdi biraz bu konudaki değişim dönüşüm dinamiklerini anlamak, güven noktasına bakabilmek, yine Yılmaz Hoca'nın da söylediği gibi aslında mevcut serbest piyasa kapitalizmi diye tabir ettiğimiz modelin tıkanıklıklarını aşarak daha değer odaklı, daha uzun vadelilik odaklı, daha etki odaklı bir dünyaya nasıl geçebiliriz? Bunun önemli sac ayaklarını oluşturan çok değerli iki kurumun iki temsilcisi hocamla birlikte bize katılacaklar. EFQM yani European Foundation for Quality Management'ın CEO'su Russell Longmire bizlerle birlikte. Russell'ı ekrana davet ederim ve bu noktadan sonra İngilizceye geçiyoruz. Good to see you too. Thank you very much for joining us. And our next guest is the Director of International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC, Dr. Jeremy Osborne. Jeremy, welcome to the program. I think you are muted, Jeremy. I cannot hear you. Just
Good point. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. Very pleased to be contributing.
No problem at all. Getting caught in the mute mode is the main trap that we all fall during these webinar years. So, Russell, without further ado, I would like to kick off with you. And as Dr. Yılmaz Erdoğan already mentioned, EF-QM model has always been one of the pillars of development and quality movement, and it's one of the pillars of the success for many industries, even Turkey as well. But things are changing. We have been going through a tremendous change, and now we are talking about some major changes that corporations face today. And there are lots of challenges are coming for the future as well. So when you look at the definition of performance and those challenges, what kind of a picture do you see? How can we redefine the term of performance in the age of rapid disruption?
Thank you for the question. That's a tough question. I think if everybody knew the success of what performance is, then they would all be very, very successful. I think you know, the big companies in the world are very good at handling disruption. They're very good at managing change, and I think we're coming to an era now where we are wanting companies to show more than just profitable return. 30 years ago, when we started our model, we were very interested in organizations and their contribution to society, and I think that has become more prevalent in the last 2 or 3 years, and will continue to be so. So I think performance in the future is going to be measured by your contribution to society, whether it be sustainability, net zero targets, whether it be better governance, whether it be actually contributing back to society and communities. I think that's the one of the biggest changes that's going to be with us for the next 3 to 5 years. And I think the other thing is that we will get a lot more focus on how companies respond to the bigger mega trends that are going on in the world. So, you know, we are generally, in most industrialized nations, becoming older. There is probably an increase in government intervention at the moment. You know, we're seeing that with the big technology companies. We're seeing that with sustainability and carbon. We're seeing it in terms of trade with sanctions. So I think they're the main differences, and I guess for all of us, and it's always been there, which is the ability to manage change and transformation, and really measure the success of that, whether it be innovation or whether it be technology or whatever, but to be able to really measure how much difference innovation makes.
Russell, as you have already mentioned, the mega trends are really shaping lots of industries, lots of business models, and lots of strategies. So we will be keeping up following those mega trends. But besides that, I think the short-termism that we have been locked for many decades have been questioned a lot, and as Harvard Business Review, we have published a lot of articles about the need for the change in the system. I think these are going to be some main axes that we are going to tackle the strategy and development for the future business plans as well. So thank you very much for your answer for this first round, and we will be digging a little bit deeper for these issues for the next round. Now, let me continue with Dr. Jeremy Osborne. Jeremy, IIRC and SASB merge and combine their powers to form Value Reporting Foundation. And we all know that value reporting is becoming a very important tool or a framework for showcasing or for exposing the value of sustainability and all the efforts that are related to sustainability, especially in terms of financial and in terms of social exposure. So could you please explain how that merger would affect the reporting landscape in the upcoming future?
Sure, and thank you very much for the question. The International Integrated Reporting Council and SASB merged a few days ago, at the beginning of June to form the Value Reporting Foundation. And we believe this will make a significant contribution towards the development of a more comprehensive global corporate reporting system, which brings together both the accounting, the financial accounting side of reporting with the sustainability accounting side of reporting. Now, I have a few slides, and I don't know if the team in the background is able to share these, because it might help if they can be shown. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. So, why did we?
The slides are about to come. Just go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay.
Our team will be showing them in the presentation mode. Go ahead, please.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, why did we merge? Over the years, the IIRC and SASB both turned 10 years old, so the combined grand age of 20. And both IIRC and SASB felt that there was a demand for rationalization, and that some form of disruption within the corporate reporting system would actually help simplify the corporate reporting landscape. And by disruption, I mean the bringing together of the integrated reporting framework and SASB standards, and the combined entity, the combined resources and relationship of the IIRC and SASB would really create critical mass in terms of an organization that would have greater global reach and would bring together both the corporate reporting conceptual framework, which is the integrated reporting framework, which we dusted down and redrafted in January this year after a very extensive consultation period in 2020, with SASB's 76 industry-specific standards, which have been growing and maturing over the last 10 years that SASB has been around. Here we go. So if we could, perhaps we could move on to the third slide, if that's okay. And that's perfect. Thank you. So as I said, we are one global organization with a unified strategy and most importantly, three principal resources: integrated thinking principles, the integrated reporting framework, and SASB standard. And our aim is to really simplify the corporate reporting landscape. Anybody who's been involved with corporate reporting, particularly on the sustainability side, or others will, I'm sure, have heard this phrase via their newsfeed. There's been a lot of frustration, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, with what's referred to as the alphabet soup of corporate reporting, and all these funny acronyms of different organizations, which each have made important contributions in their own way towards where the situation we're in today. But we felt that it was important to bring together 8 letters of that alphabet soup to create reduce that to 3 letters, the Value Reporting Foundation, or VRF. This third bullet is very important here, that we are providing active support to the launch, as we now know, of the International Sustainability Standards Board, which will be launched by the IFRS Foundation during the COP26 meeting in Glasgow this November. And we know that the prototype climate change related standards that we call them the Group of 5, the Group of 5 is really now the Group of 4. So it was IRRC and SASB, which of course is now the Value Reporting Foundation, GRI, CDP and CDSB, created a prototype climate change related standard. And the IFRS Foundation has now publicly said that it will take this as its starting point for its first standard, which we now also we know now will also be a climate change standard. If we move on a slide, our strategic goals is to align the integrated thinking principles, the integrated reporting framework, and SASB standards, and support and advocate for adoption of all of these, both amongst companies and report preparers. So that, of course, is the principles and the framework, the integrated reporting framework, and investors in terms of their demand for organizations, particularly to publish the SASB standards. And our view is that sustainability standards acquire greater coherence, particularly in the context of the financial reporting disclosures when they're brought together. If we move on briefly, one more slide, just to give you an idea of numbers. So I think this is quite helpful. Or the IRRC just published its 2020-21 integrated report. External analysis suggests there's more than 2,500 integrated reporters globally. There's also more than 1,000 SASB standards reporters, including for the first time more than 50% of the S&P 1200, of whom 50% are outside North America, which is a healthy sign of global adoption of the standards. So you can see here that the numbers are big, they're growing by the years. The assets under management of particularly the investors which are drawing on SASB standards in their portfolio management is also very significant. $72 trillion of asset under management are supporting SASB standards. So if we move on a slide, and as I said, we've combined the two entities. We are now a bigger team. We've got close to 100 staff members with a wide variety of skills and experience. And most importantly is we're now positioned to, on both the reporting side, the disclosure side, and the integrated thinking principle side, to operate globally. If we move on one more slide, over time, what you'll see, and hopefully you'll become familiar with these, are the three products. And if we just move on a slide, you'll see in all future publications that we do that the integrated thinking principles, this nice calm green color. If we move on another slide, the integrated reporting framework will be presented in sort of sky blue. And then if we move on one more slide, the standards will continue to be the SASB red that you'll probably be familiar with. And then just one final slide in closing, really in introducing the Value Reporting Foundation. I hope it's helpful to do this because we are brand new. And I know I was introduced as Director of Business and Stakeholder Engagement at the IRRC. My job title has changed. I'm now Director of Corporate Engagement for the Value Reporting Foundation. But this slide really tries to encapsulate what we're trying to do with the combined entity. And it's really all about decision-making and supporting both business decision-making on the left-hand side. So again, this is the report preparers, the integrated thinkers, and supporting their sustainable allocation of resources in the interests of creating sustainable value for both shareholders and stakeholders. And on the right-hand side are the report users and consumers in the form of investors. And the purpose really of the SASB standards, the industry-specific standards, is to support investor decision-making to encourage their portfolio management in such a way that they rebalance their portfolios towards long-term sustainable value creation, and drawing on SASB standards as a critical input for that. So the decision-making is really one of the central tenets of both of all three, the integrated thinking, the integrated reporting, and the SASB standards as a movement. And in bringing these together, our hope and ambition is that we unite both ends of this spectrum of the business decision-making, the investor decision-making within one organization, the Value Reporting Foundation. So let me pause there and perhaps we can switch off the slides and I shall ad-lib as necessary.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you for this very broad introduction of the new body. and it seems that standards is going to be the talk of the town for a while, because as Harvard Business Review, we have been writing a lot of articles about bringing standards for showing the performance of sustainability and all those impact-related initiatives within the corporation. And the main problem is going to align them with our present KPIs, present measures and other things. So at the end of the day, I think standardization is going to be the killer part of how we're going to progress in this never-ending journey of sustainable strategy. Thank you very much. And now I am shifting to Dr. Yılmaz Ergüden. Yılmaz Hocam, this is your 30th anniversary for the ARGE Consulting Company, and you have been working a lot about many issues from strategy to sustainability to governance. And for the last 30 years, you have done a lot of work with the help of civil society, with the help of other bodies and other corporations. So you now brought all those experiences into light with the book, the Sustainable Success Model book. So just tell us a little bit of how this book shaped and how these experiences contributed to the SSM model.
Thank you, Serdar. Basically, we think that resolving the problems of short-termism that the capitalism has brought recently requires us to shift our vision in many different dimensions. First dimension is probably time dimension, that we should not only be focusing on the short term, but also in the long term. Second dimension is the types of resources. We should not only be focusing on financial resources, but rather on a wide range of resources, such as the intellectual resources, social capital, physical capital, environmental capital, but many different areas. Because in order to create value, we have to utilize all these types of different resources. And not all of them could be purchased financially overnight. Some of them you have to develop. And third, you have to broaden your perspective to include all the stakeholders and the impact that you create on the stakeholders. From an economist perspective, you know, there's a terminology called externalities. Externalities are issues that do not reflect on your balance sheet, and therefore, many business decision makers ignore in making their decisions. However, if you ignore the externalities, they come back to haunt you over a period of time. Having a vision is having the foresight to see the invisible. If you can see the invisible, you can achieve the impossible. However, success is about dedication. If you define your purpose and visualize how the future you want to look like, and have the passion to put in the effort, the probability of realizing that vision increases. Yet, a vision without the necessary resources and effort to support it becomes only an illusion. When you talk about leadership, it's about assuming the responsibility to translate a vision into reality. And that requires mobilizing others' resources for your vision. Therefore, clarity of the vision, ability to communicate it, and mobilizing the stakeholders and their resources for this vision are critical keys for achieving this leadership. This is why incorporating the impacts that your organization creates, willingly or unwillingly, on all the stakeholders becomes a very critical issue in having a sustainable success. Working with the communities that you work with, looking at the externalities, and also considering the long-term impact of every action that you take helps you make more sound decisions and help you achieve more sustainable success. So our perspective, which has been developed by having worked with many different NGOs as well as governments and many different industries, helped us realize the importance of working with all the bodies, all the interested parties in making decisions, for having a proper evaluation of your actions and make sure that it's a win-win situation. Because if it is not, it comes back to you either as a government regulation, or you may lose your social license to operate, or you may lose some of your brand value, which has negative impact in terms of raising resources, both financial as well as intellectual. For example, the Y and Z generation are much more sensitive about your environmental impact. If you don't pay attention to these matters, the likelihood of recruiting the top people from the young generation gets reduced. Therefore, other companies who are doing it gets a better leg up in the competition. So our perspective, which has been developed over the years by having worked in many different industries, as well as with NGOs and the governments, helped us realize that if you don't consider your impact, and if you don't consider the future of humanity and only focus on your own organization or your own individual, the likelihood of sustainable success is reduced. So our model basically helps you ask the proper questions in an organized fashion to make sure that you do not skip these matters. And as you will realize, these are very much in line with integrated thinking. And we have translated integrated thinking by Mervyn King to Turkish a few years ago. So that book is available in our website as well as the EFQM 2020 model, which we were part of the development team, because I think everybody who is working in the management area are seeing the deficiencies of focusing only on short-term profits. So in short, I think Milton Friedman's business mentality is moving into doing good is good business. Thank you.
Yılmaz Hocam, thank you very much for this really good framework of what is the main drivers of the future success. Because as Harvard Business Review, we have been writing a lot about the need for the change of the system, getting over the short-termism and bringing much more shared value to the table rather than individual or one firm focused value. So we always receive the questions, okay, Serdar, that is good to say, but hard to do. So how are we going to do it? And your model, which brings a checklist as well as a roadmap for making this happen, is really valuable according to my humble opinion. So thank you very much for putting this in.
Thank you, Serdar.
And let me move to Russell again. And Russell, we have been talking a lot on breakthrough through innovation, disruptions, new business models, but we also see that there is a need for the continuous improvement as well. So it is not every company going to disrupt others. It's not a company going to disrupt all the industries. Disruption is a reality. Breakthrough innovations really happens, but also we are in need for bringing up a strategy for continuous improvement as well. EFQM model has always been a North Star for improvement, for continuous improvement, for breakthrough innovation. So just can you elaborate a little bit on the delicate balance between breakthrough innovations and continuous improvement, and how does EFQM model evolve throughout the last decade in order to fit this need?
Yeah, great question. So yes, you're right. I think every company has this delicate balance between, as we would say, keeping the lights on every day and becoming more efficient at keeping the lights on and dealing with change. In terms of, I guess, if I just talk a little bit about how our model has changed, and that'll give people some idea of, I guess, what's happened in the business world, as well as organizations outside of just profit making. when 30 years ago, when we talked about continuous improvement, it was very much a leadership-led, process-rich, benchmarking type approach. So we looked very closely at the senior management team. We looked at the process models and the processes across the company, how processes were improved. We looked at how people interacted with those processes, and they themselves were managed by HR processes. And obviously, we're looking at very clearly about their strategic ability to plan. I guess where we are now is, rather than looking at the leadership team, we look at leadership at every level. So this helps, I think, companies steer innovation and continuous improvement better. If we allow people to have self-responsibility, to make improvement, to innovate, change, then the company or the organization will thrive. We have no doubt about that. So now we talk about leadership at every level, whether it's in a project or a division. How much leadership gets devolved down to every employee or every team member. In terms of process and change in process, I think we can all accept that process is extremely important. It drives a lot of quality and a lot of value. But I think we're becoming more attuned to the fact that companies need to be adaptive and agile quicker. So they need to be able to change processes wholesale. Not all processes. When BMW go from petrol or diesel engines to electric, they don't change every single process. They still build cars for people to drive. The fact that the engine has changed to some parts of BMW makes no difference whatsoever. So it's very important to realize that, not all processes have to change wholesale. The real element of innovation, what we see is a lot of innovation. We see a lot of innovation planned. We see a lot of it deployed. What we tend not to, and a lot of our data points to, is companies are not great at doing what they have done for years, which is looking at the innovation, seeing what value it is delivering, whether it needs amending, whether it needs changing, whether it needs realigning, whether it needs stopping, and then go again. And I think this continuous improvement methodology that was brought of, total quality management through the 50s, 60s, and 70s has tended to drift away for innovation. And I think that's really important to realize. What we find is a lot of organizations are very, very good at planning and deploying new ways of doing things. But for some reason, they've left behind some of their disciplines around continuous improvement. I think the other thing that really helps companies align innovation and continuous improvement together is having a single purpose with a very proactive culture behind it. If your purpose, why do you exist as an organization, is known by everybody and everybody can fall behind it, then this gives every process, every innovation, every decision, every initiative, at least a measure of people saying, is this why we exist? Are we doing this for our existence, to keep giving value to all of our stakeholders, the broadest level of stakeholders, not just our financial. And I think it's been mentioned before by Yilmaz and Jeremy, which is this idea of the future. It's very easy to talk about innovation, but actually it's not about today's innovation. It's about, what are we going to be doing in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? What are our customers going to look like in 10 years' time? Not what are our customers doing today and what innovation do they need? It's, if we innovate, we are likely to change our customer base. And that's a really big, that foresight, that planning ahead, using whether it be predictive analytics or AI, or just a lot more sort of pre-mortem type thinking, is going to be really, really important to ensure that it's not just you're innovating today, but you're innovating for 10 years' time. That doesn't mean to say that that might be the right way of doing things in 10 years' time. It's just having this focus on innovation and how does it align to your business and how do you build in continuous improvement for your innovation as well as your day-to-day business. So I think that probably answers your question.
Thank you, Russell, very much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the different angles you brought. And it is really very important to understand that continuous improvement with breakthrough innovation, they should coexist. So it is not something that will overlap. And I think the evolution of EFQM model really sheds a light to manage this change. Speaking of managing change, I think it's a really important topic to discuss, and I will be digging a little bit deeper in the next round with you about how EFQM model helps people to manage, especially leaders, and as you have mentioned, leaders at every level to better understand and manage change. So thank you very much. And now I am shifting to Jeremy. Jeremy, as Yılmaz Hoca also mentioned, integrated thinking is a really strong and important enabler for creating sustainable value. So based on your experience, could you just tell us how integrated thinking would contribute to sustainable success?
Great. Well, thank you. It's likewise an excellent question and one that we've been giving a lot of thought to over the last 10 years of the integrated reporting movement. And I'm very pleased to say that in a few days' time, next Wednesday, we're going to be publishing a paper on exactly this question. It's going to be called Integrated Thinking, a Virtuous Loop. Now, we've been exploring what integrated thinking means through a series of case studies, really to get a sense of how organizations themselves apply integrated thinking and to hear directly from them what benefits it has brought to them. For anybody familiar with the integrated reporting framework, you'll know that integrated thinking has always been there. And in the early days, it was very much presented as cross-functional working and a means to break down the professional silos that have developed within organizations. And one often sees this in the reporting process where perhaps, I don't know, the head of risk management has never met the head of corporate reporting, or they only ever really meet during the annual corporate reporting process. And integrated thinking initially was really about breaking down those organizational silos to encourage companies to think about the broader objectives which both Yılmaz and Russell have mentioned, which is the creation of long-term sustainable stakeholder value, which from our perspective does include shareholders too. Now, we are in the process of publishing a whole library of case studies on integrated thinking. There are 7 of them already from 7 different organizations, and we'll probably have around about 20 by the end of this year. And they're very, very interesting to read because you really hear the voice of the organization just explaining for them how have they benefited from adopting integrated thinking. And in the paper we're publishing next week, we're launching it through a public webinar, which anybody is able to join next Wednesday on the 30th of June. We talk about integrated thinking and its benefits across 5 key areas of the business. And some of these have been talked about already in the context of the 2 models that Yılmaz and Russell have been talking about. So the first is culture and purpose. And I know that's central to the EFQM model in terms of what is the purpose of the organization, why do we exist? And that is one of the early questions that's asked for anybody who's publishing an integrated report as well. The second relates to strategy and the business model. And again, I think there's a lot of overlap there with both models. So how is the organization deploying the resources it has to hand through perhaps through ownership or through its broader relationships? I think this is the idea of the internalities, what an organization owns and accounts for directly, and the externalities, the resources and relationships that others may produce that the organization may depend on and have an impact on. And how is the organization thinking about both of these sets of resources? And within the context of the integrated reporting framework, we expand that to talk about 6 different capitals: financial capital, natural capital, human capital, intellectual capital, and social and relationship capital, and manufactured capital. And financial accountants have really focused on the first and the last of these, the financial capital and the manufactured capital, and been much less good over the decades at the other 4 types of capital. And then we have governance, risk management, and opportunities. And I think this picks up on what Russell was saying just now about the importance of innovation. Innovation is the lifeblood of any organization, and is rather narrowly prescribed in terms of how organizations have traditionally reported the innovation that they've been successfully bringing to fruition. It's been rather hemmed in by, and I say this as a management accountant, some rather fiendish financial accounting rules. And that's not really enabled companies to talk more broadly about, for example, the know-how of their people, the organizational culture, and how that may encourage innovation. And Russell's example of BMW is, from our perspective, a very timely one, because BMW have just published their first integrated report. And I think we're beginning to see a bit of a trend with why companies adopt integrated reporting is when they are going through a major transformation of their business model. And as Russell said, BMW has earlier this year announced very ambitious targets towards the electrification of their fleet. And whilst this may not affect all parts of the production process, it's nonetheless a very substantial change to the core product that BMW is producing and heralds the end of the internal combustion engine, as others have also signaled too. And I think it's no surprise that in the same year they announced that major change of their strategy, they've also adopted integrated reporting. Another example is Philip Morris International, which has set, again, early this year, very ambitious targets towards reducing tobacco consumption amongst its consumer base and amongst those who are unable to quit, to encourage switching to reduced harm products. And very ambitious targets. I think they want 50% of revenues to come from non-tobacco products by 2025. Again, I think perhaps no surprise that PMI also published its first integrated report this year. And the other areas that our study explores in the context of integrated thinking and its benefits include processes and practices. And as I think, again, it's a common theme to all of the models we've been talking about this morning, is not just about efficiency and effectiveness, but also stepping back from that. And I began my career in manufacturing, and I remember in the first few weeks of my job with Unilever having to grapple with TQM and this idea of constant improvement. And I completely get it from an efficiency perspective, but sometimes it misses the bigger question of, do we need to rethink what we're manufacturing and how we're manufacturing within the context of the sustainability of the resources we have to hand, and being held to account for the impacts we have through the externalities that our business model depends on, in terms of both the positive and negative impacts we have on society at large. And then the final area, in terms of the report on integrated thinking we're producing, and how companies talk about this, is around performance management. Now, that's an area very close to my heart. I've spent most of the last 10 plus years in sustainability consulting, working with organizations on how to measure and manage and draw into decision making the broader impacts that they may be having on the society and the environment, and really to treat that information with the same degree of control and comparability and consistency that is not just expected but required of financial information. So performance management in the context of integrated thinking really is thinking beyond perhaps again the rather narrow view of how is whatever we happen to be measuring contributing towards top line growth or bottom line efficiency or the health of the balance sheet or having positive cash flows, all stuff which is a necessary precondition for a business to thrive. But thinking beyond that, what are we contributing towards society? Are we a force for good within society? Or dare I say it, would society be better off were we not to exist? And how are we contributing towards environmental sustainability, or how are we minimizing the impact on environmental destruction, as the case may be, depending on the business model? And integrated thinking really encourages, I think, organizations to make the connections between these disparate elements of how one thinks about how an organization is constructed and managed on a day-to-day basis, always within the context of the sustainability of the organization and the sustainability of the resources and relationships on which it depends and which it impacts, and not just thinking about the environmental sustainability, but also broader impact on society, intellectual capital, etc., etc.
Jeremy, thank you very much. I think we need a more integrated, a broader perspective to better understand all the effects and externalities, and as well as the value we will be creating with all the sustainability related strategies and models. So thank you very much for your ideas about that. And now, without further ado, I would like to move to Yılmaz Hocam. Yılmaz Hocam, just give us a little bit of detail about the sustainable success model. What are some important elements or the pillars of the model, and how will they translate to success in the business?
Thank you. I'll be happy to do so. I'll give a few lines that we are focusing on in terms of measuring and also showing a recipe for sustainable success. The first is clear and focused definition of purpose and value perspective. If you define your purpose and your value-focused perspective clearly, you can build coalitions around it much more easily. And so that's the first item. Second, in terms of focusing on your what you are doing, do not focus only on yourself, not me, but us, and gaining the trust of your stakeholders. This is extremely important as well, and this can be accomplished only by governance, stakeholder engagement, and understanding what's critical for them, because we all live in an environment where we need many different stakeholders for our survival as well as flourishment. Third, both at the board level as well as at the executive level, we need multidimensional, diverse experience, which means integrated thinking, diversity of mind, and having an inclusive understanding in terms of our workplace as well as our partners. Fourth, continuous development and technological innovation. You cannot leave your eye out of what's coming out from new technologies. They could be very disruptive. At the same time, you cannot only be expecting and waiting for the next new thing. You have to improve yourself every day, because everyone else is doing the same. If you are sitting still, you are likely to be beaten by someone else. Fifth, there is no single path to business approach. We have to be agile. We have to focus on hybrid models. But at the same time, we have to be balanced, both with respect to our time frame as well as our resources and so forth, to be able to become more resilient and survive in the long term. We also think that corporate volunteerism, and especially focusing on the sustainable development goals for sustainable development, is very important because it gives you a much better sense and ability to connect with many different parts of the world, many different types of stakeholders more easily. I'll give you an example on this in a moment. And finally, we have to focus on the quality of life of all the people, both in our organization or who touches our organization. Quality and balance of life is important, and many people are becoming more aware of the importance of this, and that brings the resilience of the organization. These may be too much theoretical, so what I'm going to give you is an example of how such an outlook helps us solve some problems in a much more economic manner. Many corporations want to reduce their use of water because water is a scarce resource which is critical for life, and if there is a drought at some place, all the investment you made in that community, in that region, become a junk. Either people have to move or to other places, or you cannot operate there, or it becomes very expensive and so forth. So many companies want to reduce their water usage, which is a very good thing for the world. But if you're focusing only on your own water usage in a particular region, it might be quite expensive after a while to save additional liters of water. And generally, if you focus only on your own operations, you delegate this problem to an engineer who tries to identify the leakages and finds new technologies to reduce water use. However, if you assume the leadership at the top level and start looking at your whole value chain's utilization of water, then you may begin to incorporate water usage into your product design, and also your knowledge about how to use less water in your own operation, share it with your supply chain, and probably reduce water usage hell of a lot more significantly than what you would be able to do yourself in your own corporation. Because you may not have full control of the full value chain, but having that focus provides you an opportunity to make much more good for the world. And finally, if you focus not only on your own value chain, what you can control, but rather focus on what is important for the people who live in that place, which means, how can I improve the water usage in the water basin that I'm drawing from? If you start asking this question, if you take a helicopter view, you will probably find much more economical and much more effective solutions. One company did this and realized that only by helping the agriculture utilization of water to measure their usage and how their usage has an impact on reduction of the level of water, they could save tens or hundreds of times more water than what their company was using. So this understanding of sustainable success model tells us that look at the problem from not only your own perspective, but from the perspective of everybody who shares that particular resource, and try to identify solutions where you can help them. Some of it might be sharing only knowledge. Some of it might be making very minor investment to measure and manage it better. Some of it might be doing more collective work. Some of it might be working with the government for better regulation. So there are many different options where you can make a difference. But if you focus only on your own operation, after a while it becomes too expensive and the challenge becomes bigger and the impact becomes much smaller. If you have a broader perspective to issues, if you take the helicopter view, you can solve problems much more easily. So this is the understanding that the sustainable success model tries to promote.
Yılmaz Hocam, thank you very much for bringing this on, because a very important professor in Harvard Business School, Rebecca Henderson, who works on sustainability, who do research on sustainability, really mentions that we need a holistic view in order to focus not to me now mindset, but us later mindset, which will bring all the stakeholders together to think on the resources. So thank you very much for bringing this in. Ladies and gentlemen, especially the gentlemen of the panel, as we are running out of time, to use time more efficiently, I would like you to use 3 minutes for answering the questions for this round, because I received a really good quality of questions from the audience, and I would like to spare some time for the audience questions. So gentlemen, please, very brief answers are required for this round. Let's move to Russell. Russell, one of the very important aspects of the EFQM model is it's a framework for managing change, and managing change is becoming harder and harder day by day. So how does EFQM model help leaders or decision makers at every level to manage change effectively?
Okay, quick answer. The first thing the model does is actually benchmark where you are today. So it doesn't give you a biased view of where you are. It's not your view of where you are. It's an index that's been used for 30 years. So the first thing before you manage any change is really identify where you are in the organization, and how you're performing. The second thing is, obviously the model gives you huge areas of improvement, and that gives you some sort of target. And I think it gives you a framework by which to manage that change. We could talk obviously for a long time on change management. At the end of the day, there's a couple of simple rules, I guess. We've got to be able to articulate the benefits. We've got to give people the responsibility to be able to change and make that change, and to understand the benefits to them, and then retain the knowledge. I think this is the really important thing about the EFQM model. It has always been about organizations developing their own people to be able to do change or continuous improvement or transformation. So we empower that organization to train their people, to use a tried and tested framework, to use a scoring system, to use a maturity of, plan, do, check, etc. So we allow them to learn, and therefore they keep that knowledge within the organization. And that's I think the biggest benefit of the model is it empowers your people in an organization to make the change, to make the continuous improvement, to learn from it and continue doing it. And I don't want to dismiss consultants, but that's what it's all about. It's actually about making sure your people understand change. Once they've done it once, they'll be able to do it in the future.
Thank you, Russell. A very brief but very helpful framework of how to understand managing the change. Thank you very much. And now I'm moving to Jeremy. Jeremy, we know that we are talking a lot about sustainability or value creation, but communicating how we create value, how we share it, or how we measure it is very crucial for internal and external stakeholders to comprehend the importance and the outcomes of sustainability and related models. So can you just share, regarding your experience on this domain, can you just elaborate a little bit on how can we better communicate the way or the value we derive from those kind of experiences, and for instance the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and etc., and how can we better communicate the value we created, shared, and got out of these frameworks and strategies?
Well, that's a big question, but I'll try and do it justice in under 3 minutes.
Right.
So I think there's two elements to the question there. I think the first is, how does an organization understand the value that it's created for its stakeholders, and secondly, how does it understand the contribution it's making towards the SDGs? Now, I'm making a slightly artificial distinction here because, of course, stakeholders will also be beneficiaries of contributions to the SDGs. So the integrated reporting framework is, as I've said, is very clear that value creation is not only for providers of financial capital, i.e. investors and debt holders, but is also contribution towards stakeholders. So the first thing is for an organization to understand who are the stakeholders who are most important to that organization. And I would propose that not all stakeholders are equal. Different organizations will have different stakeholders who matter. I mean, clearly customers will be important to all businesses, employees, suppliers, etc. But so may host governments, so may local communities, depending on the nature of the industry. So the first thing to establish is who are your stakeholders, and then drawing, as I've talked about in the context of integrated thinking, drawing on robust measurement methodologies, actually measuring, counting, measuring, valuing, possibly even monetizing the value that's being created. And this is Yilmaz's point around internalities and externalities. So potentially bringing some of those externalities in from the cold and actually reporting on them, even if there's not a requirement from a financial accounting perspective. And I think it's clear as well that whilst monetization of value creation can enable comparability, it's not necessarily necessary. And one gets into the murky world of economic modeling at this point. And comparability can become difficult when particularly those who've created the data or understand the methodologies behind the data may not necessarily agree that the optimal monetization methodology has been used. And then the second point around the SDGs, again, it's a similar process. We would encourage organizations to really think through all of the SDGs and which are the most important ones that your organization has contributed to, because it's unlikely to be all of them. And then in a robust way, identify what you've actually contributed. And I think the key thing here is, what have you contributed that's above and beyond what you would have been doing in the absence of any knowledge or familiarity with the SDGs? So how have you perhaps recalibrated your business model in order to optimize the contribution that you're making to the SDGs, even if that may have come at the cost of perhaps top line or bottom line value creation, in the interest of demonstrating that you are a responsible corporate citizen and thinking of those in the world around you, not just of your own stakeholders and of your own shareholders, rather.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And I'm moving to Yilmaz Hoca once more. Yilmaz Hoca, while you were developing the SSM model, you had a sharp focus on integrated reporting, integrated thinking, and EFQM 2020 model. So can you just explain the reason why you have focused on those models?
First of all, we believe that these are the models for the future as well. So we analyze them. I mean, at ARGE Consulting, we follow the global developments in management technologies. So when we identify something good, we try to both understand and implement it in the country as well. And also we try to contribute to its development too. And since we have not only done so, but also implemented these with many of our clients, for example, ARGE Governance Academy is the first Turkish institution to prepare an integrated report in the country. We are fully aware of their strengths and how it can be utilized in the future. That's why we try to benefit from that. At the same time, we are focusing very much on governance matters, because good governance is the key to flourishment of good management. If you don't have the right guidance and oversight mechanism, which is collective decision-making in a way, in which the management can flourish, then the sustainability of success becomes a question. So incorporating these models, as well as our knowledge about governance and understanding of those matters, helped us develop the sustainable success model in a more comprehensive manner. And as you have seen from the slide that I shared earlier, our model has value in it as well. It is with regards to vision, it has continuous learning, looking at the ecosystem, and looking at unification, all of these helps us understand a much broader perspective in our decision making, helps us incorporate the stakeholders, the externalities, and the time frame into our decision making. In short, what we are trying to do is protect the humanity from the excesses of humans by bringing in a perspective which is much broader, and these are incorporated in integrated thinking as well as EFQM models.
Thank you very much, Yılmaz Hocam. Let me invite Russell and Jeremy to the stage as well. We have a lot of questions from the audience, but I will be trying to cherry pick the best ones in order to create a little bit of broader perspective for this Q&A session as well. So Yılmaz Hocam, let me continue with you. Someone from the audience just mentioned that in Turkey we have seen a lot of companies are family companies. So creating change in family companies is a little bit harder, at least in theory. So how does your model apply to family company structure in Turkey?
I think it applies to public companies as well as family companies, because our model is basically how to think about the future, how to bring about the future. And if you focus only on the individuals, and the biggest problem with the family businesses is that the founder becomes such a strong person and such a strong force that the company turns around the founder rather than the company becoming an institutional by itself. So if we can separate those, then the future of the company could be much longer than the lifespan of the founder. Many founders want to do this. However, just one thing is not enough. You have to invest, you have to prepare not only the company, but also your own understanding as well as the next generations with this understanding. And I think the model helps in terms of thinking in that perspective.
Thank you very much, Yılmaz Hocam. Russell, you have mentioned that purpose sits at the core of all the strategy that we are trying to bring together, and also the EFQM model also puts a huge emphasis on purpose. Someone from the audience says that purpose is the buzzword for the last couple of years, but we have seen that top management decides the purpose and tries to cascade to the bottom. So do you think this will work, or what is the healthy way to develop and incorporate a promising purpose?
It's a very good point, and obviously it's coming into law in a lot of countries. The companies and organisations have to have a clear purpose, and you're absolutely right. Like any governance measure, it can be enforced by the leadership. It's very simple that if your purpose is going to be dictated by a few people in the same way as your strategy and the same way as you manage your business, I think that's sort of the outlook that we've moved away from in the last 10 to 15 years. People won't want to work for you. Stakeholders won't want to supply you or invest in you. It's a very short-term view, and I think it doesn't take a lot of analysis of a company when you actually see that what's happening at the team level or the employee level. And I don't know if people have followed it, but it's a very interesting example with the Brewdog, the Scottish brewer, which has become one of the most iconic brewing companies of beer in the UK, fills the shelves, dominating, growing internationally. And they were very, very fixed on their purpose, which was to disrupt beer and give everybody an idea of what good beer making should be. And it was owned by the people. And it was very quickly found out that their staff were disaffected, and now suppliers don't want to supply them, and their customers, supermarkets, etc., are asking some very, very tough questions. You might get away with it for a short time, but you won't get away with it a long time.
Thank you very much, Russell. And Jeremy, we have seen a lot of companies showing interest in integrated reporting, but only a few of them, especially in Turkey, does integrated reporting. How can we encourage or how can we nudge companies to shift to integrated reporting?
Well, thank you. And actually, Turkey has had some great examples of integrated reporting over the years. So, for example, Guarantee Bank, BBVA, is a very vocal supporter of integrated reporting. Çimsa Cement, and a number of really leading financial institutions within Turkey. And I would just like to thank publicly the work of the Turkish Integrated Reporting Committee, ERTA. I know, Yilmaz, you've been involved with that over many years. It's a shining beacon of what a national integrated reporting can do in terms of encouraging adoption of integrated reporting. I think there's different angles to this. I think the first thing is I'd encourage anybody on this call to be curious about what they've heard in the context of integrated reporting, integrated thinking. Go to the website, the Value Reporting Foundation, download the framework, have a look at the integrated thinking case studies. It will give you a good sense of what it's all about. And it's very consistent with what Yilmaz and Rustin have been talking about in terms of having a purposeful organization where the strategy is focused around long-term sustainable value creation for shareholders and stakeholders. So I think curiosity is probably the first thing I would suggest. Have a look at the integrated reports produced by some of Turkey's leading integrated reporters. I think most of the companies that are founder members, in inverted commas, of ERTA, of the Turkish Integrated Reporting Committee, also publish integrated reports. So look and see what your fellow countryman and countrywoman have been doing in the context of integrated reporting. I think the other angle is to think about how investors use an integrated report and what investors might be saying about integrated reporting, and incorporating into that reliable and consistently produced, they tend to be called non-financial indicators, sustainability indicators, etc., etc. We know that there is a movement that's gathering considerable momentum, and I think we'll see this continue to become the entrenched perspective view, particularly the other side of the pandemic. We hear we hear countries like America, like the UK, like the EU, obviously not a country, but talking about the importance of building back better. The EU Green Finance Initiative, for example, is vast in its scale, likewise in America. And in order for investors to know where their investments are likely to create the greatest value, but also the greatest sustainable impact, they need good, high-quality corporate reports with the necessary information. And the integrated reporting framework is exactly that. It provides the framework, the clothing of the report, and the SASB standards or their equivalent elsewhere provide investors with the bones of the report in terms of measuring impact. So I think that would be my advice: is be curious if you're not currently doing it, and think about how investors are using the information that you either currently produce or could be producing, and how that may enable your organization to benefit from the vast investment there'll be in sustainable organizations, particularly when we're the other side of the pandemic.
And ARGE is one of the 10, 11 training partners of integrated reporting. So we'll be happy to help out as well.
Thank you for bringing this detail on the table, Yilmaz Hocam. So gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your effort for coming here today and sharing your perspectives and insights with me and with the audience. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Evet, sevgili izleyiciler. Yilmaz Hocam'a teşekkür ediyorum.
I thank Professor Yilmaz. Indeed, the picture we have seen from this perspective has been crystal clear. The process we have been going through and the model implemented, and even the adage of Milton Friedman, by Yılmaz Argüden, like the business of companies is to look at business is now changing together. The system needs to be transformed, needs to be changed. So we are moving from me and today to tomorrow, us mentality, and this can be seen in every decision maker, and this needs to be instilled at every organization. Sustainable success model frameworks, as put forward by Professor Yılmaz, and structures like EFQM or integrated reporting are important pillars of implementing such changes in terms of sustainability, in terms of impact, or in terms of acquiring a holistic strategy that brings together different elements and help us explain both financial and non-financial value for stakeholders. We are going to, of course, address these issues more intensely in the future. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we look forward to meeting with you in the new events addressing such issues. We wish you helpful days. Bye-bye.